Hi, I'm Ryan Bizey, and today I'm going to talk about tuning the violin. If you've gone through my other stuff, we've talked about how to hold the instrument, what's on there, how to hold the bow, how to rosin your bow, how to play basic notes. Today we're going to talk about tuning the instrument. Now, if you're a brand new beginner, most likely, like if you're in elementary school or middle school as a beginner, you're handing your instrument to your teacher right now to have them tune it. But it's best that you learn to tune it at some point, and your teacher will go over some of these things. But I like to think of this, again, this is to help you as you go. So if you're like, how did the teacher say to do this? You can watch this and remind yourself. Even my students can watch this to remind themselves, if any of you are watching out there. Anyway, tuning the instrument. You might remember before I talked about, now on my instrument, I only have one fine tuner on my E string, whereas you probably have all four strings with fine tuners, and you should use those. However, pegs are needed. You do need to tune with pegs. I know I have even 8th graders who are afraid to turn their pegs. They're afraid they're going to break a string. The truth is, you're all going to break a string at some point. It's going to happen. It's not that big a deal. I've seen very few people injured. I shouldn't even say that. I mean, people don't get injured by broken strings. Most of the time they break in your case as it is. And when they break, when you're tuning, they don't like snap up and hit you in the face or anything like that. So stop worrying about that. That's not going to happen. So what we're doing here is we're just going to talk about tuning the instrument basically. Our instruments are tuned in fifths. Most of you have no idea what that means, but that's okay. Just know that it's tuned in fifths. It will help. Orchestras all over the world tune to A. So you start with your open A string and you'll tune with that, which is 440 hertz. You might hear an A440 or something like that. That just means 440 hertz. It's most of the Western world, at least. There are different tunings, and if you do like Baroque music, sometimes people like to do period type tunings, which are a little different. I'm not going to worry about that right now. I have had a teacher myself who tuned to practically a B flat, I swear. I'd go to my lessons every week, and he'd give me an A, and I'd have to tune my instrument practically up a half step every week. And he was a really good teacher, but that was kind of weird. I don't know. I'm not going to go into too much of that. Anyway, so don't worry about if you're like, what are 440 hertz? I don't know. It's just the way we create that sound with electronics and that sort of thing, and can understand it scientifically for the most part. Now I tune by ear most of the time because that's the way I was brought up. We didn't have a whole lot of tuners when I was a kid, so we learned to tune by ear. I know what an A basically sounds like. Might not be completely right at 440 hertz. No, probably in an entire orchestra, in your orchestra, you probably don't have everybody right at 440 hertz. It's right around there, and it all comes together, and it sounds fine. But if you have somebody at 440 hertz and somebody at 450, it's not going to sound as good. Anyway, so we always start with an A, and if you're in a full orchestra, the oboe player will play the A for everybody, and they usually have a tuner in front of them to keep that going. And so everybody tunes off of that. When you tune, play softly. You don't be like, I'm going to play really loud. No, okay? You play soft enough to where you can hear whoever's playing the tone for you. You can hear that tone and yours and make sure it sounds right. When you tune, I'm actually going to go to the E string here because that's where my fine tuner is, and that's what most of you are going to be using. When you're tuning, when I turn it one way, you hear the pitch is going down. My hands don't work quite this way. If you turn it counterclockwise, the pitch goes down. If you turn it clockwise, the pitch goes up, and I can take this up a little bit more. You hear how that pitch has gone up, right? It's not the same as what it was. So then, the way you tune it is you actually, when your A is in tune, you play like your E with your A, and it should sound good. Now, that's the best way I can describe it. In the music world, we have what's called a perfect fifth, which is what our strings are tuned to. And a perfect fifth is very pleasing to the ear. And so when you get it there, it sounds really good. And so let's see if I can get it really good here. Now, hopefully you think, geez, that sounds pretty good. And the other thing is when you're tuning, you should choose long bows. I don't know how many kids I see tuning. Problem is that when you do that, you do different pressures on the instrument and you're not getting the actual note that you're playing with those different pressures. You just want to do nice, long, smooth bows to help get in tune. And then you will be able to hear it better and you're going to have a more accurate pitch. Now, when we use our pegs, I'm going to go from the A to the D here. I'm going to put out a tune so you can hear that. So, for one thing, you want to hook your hand around the end of the scroll and then move it. I always move it with my thumb and index finger then on this side. On this side, we'll talk about when I get over to that in just a minute. So, anyway, you hook that around. Hopefully that sounded pleasing to you. Hopefully you also noticed that I didn't move my hand a whole lot. It's just little bits. You do not want to crank these pegs. It's not like tuning a guitar, if you've ever done that, where you really can crank those when you need to tune it. You don't do that on a violin. You never want to do that. Now, I talk about the pleasing sound of the perfect fifth. The only problem, and this is a music term, again, you may not understand it, but just roll with me on this, is a perfect fourth is kind of the inverse of a perfect fifth. And it can basically be the same note. So a perfect fourth can sound really good too. And you can maybe have your string tuned a little too high when you're tuning it. And then you get to that fourth, oh, that sounds pretty good. And then, it's actually not. So that's one of those things. Over time, you just get used to what your instrument is supposed to sound like. You play it enough that, now it doesn't mean you'd be able to listen to all your strings. No, you still want to tune by those fifths and understand. You tune your A and go through those fifths. Again, on these, you you tighten them, you turn them clockwise, and the pitch goes up, and counterclockwise, and the pitch goes down. Now, I talked about when you move to this side. Now, for some of you, you're not going to be able to move your hand around the scroll and it's not going to work. You're still going to do this. By the way, I do recommend trying to tune your instrument in playing position like this because you can play it, hear it, and know where you are, rather than play, adjust, play. I see so many people do that. It's hard to know exactly where you are. You do this, you're going to get in better position. But sometimes you get sticky pegs, especially if you're using student instruments. They're not as nice. My instrument tunes very well. It's a very good instrument. But if you have student instruments, you can get pegs that get sticky. They don't want to move as well. And sometimes you have to put pressure onto that. Like you're going to push that peg in and turn it. Because you might turn it and it turns right back. I'm sure almost anybody who's ever played the violin has found that out. They've tried tuning it and it tuned right back. And they're like, I can't do it or something. I have kids do that all the time. But you want to I usually recommend, like on the D and the G, I'm grabbing the scroll, pushing in with my palm, and then turning to make sure I'm pushing that in. I push it in even before I turn. That way, I know it's going to stay really well. I don't have to do that with my own instrument because, again, my pegs work really well. But like on a student instrument, on stuff that's manufactured by a machine, you may have problems with that. Mine is handmade. But you push. If you've watched my videos, I told the story about tuning a student's instrument and I pulled the scroll right off. That was on a very cheap instrument. I don't know how many times I've done this. I've been teaching for 7 years now. And I don't know how many hundreds of instruments I have tuned, and that's happened once, and it was a very cheap instrument. So don't worry about that on this sort of thing. Of course, at the same time, you shouldn't be pulling really hard. And I wasn't pulling hard when that happened. It was a very cheap instrument. So just put a little pressure to push it in. If you have problems with that, talk to your teacher, talk to somebody who knows a lot of what they're doing to help you. There are things you can get to help your pegs stick a little bit better, or if they're really sticky and they don't want to turn at all, there's stuff that you can get to help them turn better. Talk to people who know what you want to get. You can go to most of your places where you rent or buy your musical instruments to get such things. And if you just say, hey, I need something to either get my pegs to turn better or to they're not turning well enough, they can get you the right stuff to help you out with that. So that is the basics of tuning your instrument. I know it seems so simple the way I do it, and it's going to take a lot of practice by you. Again, don't think, well, I've watched this video, let me go on to the next one. Practice this a lot. Tuning is so important. As with a lot of these things that I've done, I go through it very quickly, but the idea is that you can watch it over and over again to help yourself out and remind yourself, again, what your teacher probably told you in class. So thank you for joining me and learning about tuning, and keep enjoying playing the violin.